The police said to me, "Are you Michael O'Brien?" I said, "Yes." They said, "We're arresting you for the murder of Phillip Saunders." And I was so shocked, and I turned around and I said, "Who the fucking hell is Phillip Saunders? I don't know who the guy you're talking about." I remember the judge said to me, "You have had every opportunity through your lawyers and through yourself to put your case before the jury. I believe you've been rightly convicted, and there's only one sentence I can give you, and that is one for life." I didn't care. I didn't care if I lived or died at that time, because I was in such a bad mental state. My name is Michael O'Brien. I served 11 years and 43 days in prison for a crime I didn't commit, together with my two co-accused Ellis, Sherwood and Darren for the murder and robbery of Cardiff Newsagent Phillip Saunders in 1987. I now campaign and help other victims of miscarriages of justices. On the night in question, I was out stealing cars with my two co-accused. I've always said that, I was not an angel. I stand by that, but I wasn't Ronnie Biggs either. I was just getting mixed up with petty crime, mostly, allowing myself to be carried in stolen vehicles. And we were out on the night in question when Mr. Saunders was brutally attacked and died 5 days later from his injuries. I'll never forget that night. I remember it was raining. I can remember that far back. We were near the vicinity of Annesley Court, but not in Annesley Court, where the murder took place. But we were there like about an hour before. Obviously, we passed it because we looked in all the car parks. We're looking for cars. That's what we were out, trying to do on the night in question. And we walked 3 miles to our friend's house. I can remember calling for my friend Richard Yates. For us to have committed the murder, to give you an example, we had to run 3 miles in 5 minutes, which is near enough impossible to do. But that's what the police alleged that we did do. My co-accused Darren Hall can't walk very far. He couldn't run because of his legs. I'll never forget the day I had a knock on the door when the police said to me, "Are you Michael O'Brien?" I said, "Yes." They said, "We're arresting you for the murder of Phillip Saunders." And I was so shocked, and I turned around and I said, "Who the fucking hell is Phillip Saunders?" They handcuffed me, took me out of my sister-in-law's house, took me to Canton Police Station in Cardiff. I was terrified. I was absolutely terrified when I was in that police station. I'd never been arrested in my life before. Darren Hall had confessed and implicated me and Ellis Sherwood in the murder of Phillip Saunders by saying he was the lookout and we actually killed Phillip Saunders, which was a hell of a shock to hear something like that when we knew that it wasn't true. Now, in total, Darren Hall done 14 different statements. 14. I mean, he kept on changing his statements. You could clearly see there was something not right here. We were arrested on November the 1st, 1987, and were released November the 3rd. We were released on bail pending further inquiries. I was so traumatised when I first was released from the police custody the first time, I ended up in a mental hospital because I was so shocked and damaged by the interviewing techniques and the way we were treated. I was handcuffed to a hot radiator for long periods of time. I was interviewed without a lawyer being present. I was handcuffed to a table in a CID office, denied food and water whilst I was in the police station, and denied access to my family. My wife was heavily pregnant at the time. I already had a son called Kyle, who was 1 year of age. My daughter died while I was waiting for the trial. Her name was Kylie, and she was only 3 months old, and she died of a cot death. So I was 19 years of age, in prison for something I didn't do. I remember the judge said to me, "You have had every opportunity through your lawyers and through yourself to put your case before the jury. I believe you've been rightly convicted, and there's only one sentence I can give you, and that is one for life." And I can remember holding on to the metal railings around the dock to hold me up because I felt like my legs were going to go. And I remember I was crying my eyes out, and I said to my father, "Dad, as long as you know I never done it, that's all which matters. I didn't do it." And then they took us down, and I remember that. Unfortunately, my stepfather died when I was in prison as well, who brought me up and wasn't there to see me clear my name. The evidence consisted of a number of inmates who admitted on remand that we confessed to them. Also, the evidence of a police officer who alleges while we were in the police cells that we confessed to the murder. I was shouting to Ellis, Sherwood, "Why don't you tell him who done it?" And he was supposed to reply, "Being on remand means nothing. Shut your mouth." That conversation never took place, but it was placed before the jury. It was all circumstantial. There was no forensic evidence to tie us to the crime because we wasn't there. There was forensics leading to somebody else. There was a fingerprint on a whiskey bottle, which didn't belong to any of us. And to this day, we still do not know whose fingerprint that is. When I've asked for the whiskey bottle to try and find the real murderer, what I have found is the whiskey bottle has now gone missing. So I've been pursuing, to try and find the real killer, because to me it's very important. And as I said before, on many occasions, I'm not the primary victim here, and we mustn't lose sight of that. The primary victim is Phillip Saunders and his family. I'm the secondary victim of what somebody done a heinous crime, and I become a secondary victim because of it. So I think that's very important to point out, in that regard. I've been out now since 1998, and I've been fighting to get the case reopened. I want the real killer caught. I was lucky enough to meet the victim's family in a TV program I did a couple of years ago, and they said, "We knew you didn't do it." And it was a very emotional time for me, the victim's family. And the one thing which stands in my mind is the sister of Phillip Saunders turned around and said, "I hope we catch the real killer before I die." Now, bearing in mind, this lady is 92 years of age. And when you consider that, there's a real possibility justice might not be done before she leaves this world. And I find that very disturbing, that I can't get justice for the victim's family, because it's very frustrating for me, for them. It's just not fair. And you just think justice still hasn't been done all these years later. And it's wrong in principle, and it's wrongful. Stop. Somebody must know something to do with this particular crime, and I do hope they come forward with new evidence, or we've heard whispers about new evidence, but we don't know what's going on because the police won't tell us. So it was a big eye opener for myself, a learning curve, and certainly a shocking learning curve, because you could argue if I never went out that night to try and steal a car, maybe all this wouldn't have happened. And I thought about that, and there's a lot of if, buts and maybes, and when you reflect on it, I was on the police radar because I was out with the boys trying to do things, and I got to take some responsibility for that as well. Prison, people got this notion of porridge, that it's a laugh and it's a joke, and they got all the PlayStations. Well, I can tell people now that I seen 7 people murdered in one prison in Long Lartin. Norman Manning was the first person I seen die in front of me, and my gut instinct was to go over to see if I could help him. And when I seen the wounds on him, I knew he wasn't going to live. The top security prisons, there's a lot of violence in those places, and if you don't watch yourself, you never know that you could be the next victim. You just do not know what's going to happen. It was horrifying what I saw, and those scars will probably stay with me for the rest of my life. Regardless of what these people were in for, nobody deserves to die. Well, the prison officers was like, "Oh, well, they all say they're innocent, don't they?" But as the years went on and people see me campaigning and fighting, I found there was other innocent people. I was in there with the Birmingham 6, the Guildford 4 were in there, the Cardiff 5. I was so naive. I actually thought I was the only innocent person in prison, first of all. You know, because I was still sticking to the system that these things don't happen. I was prepared to die in prison. I was prepared to not accept parole. It was a chance I was prepared to take because I knew I was innocent. Five years after I was in prison, I coordinated the first hunger strike throughout the prison system, and we all refused our Christmas meals. And it brought attention to our cases. I'd done it, I think it was twice I'd done it. We didn't want to kill ourselves or anything like that. We just wanted to raise awareness. And we knew the media would be interested if they knew we were on hunger strike, saying, we're not having our Christmas meals. We should be with our family. We should be with our family, and it's not fair that we're not. So why should we have our Christmas meal? And we're rejecting it. We don't want it. I walked into the TV room one day and I seen my house on the TV with my mother being interviewed outside. So I was quite shocked. But that's when the campaign started really taking off, when Liberty, Conviction and the National Association of Probation Officers got involved. And then there was some TV programmes made, radio programmes made. A number of the witnesses who said that we admitted to confessing to them, admitted they lied on national television. Then they went to visit Darren Hall in Grendon Prison, and Darren changed his story and he said, listen, we didn't do this. The CCRC got set up in 1997, had the Criminal Cases Review Commission, which looks at the miscarriages of justices, and our case was referred on October the 29th, 1998. It was referred back to the Court of Appeal. It was probably one of the most damning reports into a police force for a number of years, especially South Wales Police. And we were released in dramatic circumstances 2 months later, where we got bail pending the appeal, which is unheard of in those days. Because, you know, we were still convicted murderers in the eyes of the law, but we were out on bail pending a new appeal. So we were home for Christmas, and that was an amazing... euphoria. I just couldn't believe it. You know, 1 minute I'm in prison doing a life sentence, the next day I'm out celebrating Christmas with my family. I mean, it was just something I just dreamed of. Oh, I remember the day I was released like it was yesterday. I was laying on my bed, we went for bail. It was December the 21st, and it was my daughter's birthday, the one I lost in prison. I don't know whether she was watching over me, I don't know. I was laying on my bed, it was 6:15, and on BBC Radio 5, there was a bulletin which come on, and it said 3 men who are claiming to be innocent are going to be released on £5,000 bail tomorrow. I thought, that's got to be us. And that was the first time I knew that I was going home. I was going home the next morning. All the doors banged in the prison system because everybody heard what was going on and knew I was going to be released the next day. And they were all going, Mikey O'Brien's going home tomorrow. The pots and pans come out like as they do and banging on, hey, all the cheers and everything. And I just couldn't believe it. And when I come out, I remember saying to the governor, because I was treated quite badly in some of the prisons I was in, I did say to the governor, when I get in front of those cameras, I am going to tell him everything what you've done to me. Everything, all of you. You should be ashamed of yourself. And I said, when I write my book as well, I'm going to expose you for what you did. Individuals, like, you know, and they didn't like it. The next day, we didn't get released till 4 o'clock. But, and I was smoking like a chimney, as you can imagine, like my nerves were in pieces. I didn't know what to expect. Everybody was coming from the other wings to wish me well and, you know, say their goodbyes. I found that very hard. Saying goodbye to people I knew were innocent and I had to walk away and I couldn't take them with me. That was very, very difficult. I wanted revenge. I did say to South Wales Police, I did say on the TV, I said, I'm going to be their worst nightmare for what they did to me. And that was my comments. I said, how dare you do this to me? You know what I mean? I said, you know, I was really bitter. I could taste the bitterness in my mouth and the blood, you know, the poison going through my veins at that time was quite bad. You know, I wanted to hurt them like they hurt me and like they hurt my family. If I could have got done for my thoughts, I think I'd have been in serious trouble. because, you know, this police officer who done what he did and made up the confession outside the cells, I was very bitter towards him, very, very angry. And, that's just the way it was. But it took me a number of years, as I said, it took me till 2012 before I got rid of the bitterness. I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder in 1997 in Cardiff prison, but he couldn't put it down to exactly what it was, because obviously if he admitted that I was suffering PTSD because I was wrongly convicted, then he would be going against the system. But he admitted that I was suffering some form of PTSD. Now, I wasn't diagnosed until 2001 with the PTSD, but it was on par with the people who'd been at Beirut when they'd been held hostage. That's how bad the PTSD was. And soldiers who'd been in wars. That's the equivalent of the level of PTSD I suffered, especially seeing people stabbed in prison, hurt in prison, and even murdered in prison. When you look at it in the round, I don't know how I survived it. I really don't know how I survived my 11 years in prison. I think what kept me going was knowing I was innocent and knowing I had to fight and educate myself, because my two other co-accused were in no fit state to. So the onus was on me. We didn't have no legal advisors when we come out, no financial advisors, and we're given large amount of money. My first cheque was for £50,000, and probably the most I've ever had was £1,000. And then they give me a cheque for £100,000. Now, I did go down the wrong roads for a short while when I first come out, partying, taking drugs, you know, before I got married and all that the second time, and I went down wrong roads, which I'm ashamed of. I also met a lot of people I thought were my friends, some people I'd known for 30 years. I got ripped off, lost a lot of money, and my compensation went down the Swanee, really, you know, because bad choices, bad investments as well. You know, I invested in the stock market as well. I didn't know anything about the stock market. So I made a lot of mistakes. I made a lot of mistakes like that, you know. In 2018, I was actually near enough homeless. My marriage went down the pan because of my son, because we lost my son in 2012, and things wasn't right since then, and I was just existing. I wasn't living, you know, I was giving up. I did go through a phase when I first went into prison, the first year, of drinking drugs. I never used to smoke before I went into prison. Never smoked a cigarette, never touched cannabis, never touched anything. I wasn't that type of person. But I got mixed up in all that in the first year when I was in the prison. I didn't care. I didn't care if I lived or died at that time, because I was in such a bad mental state. I'm still seeing a psychiatrist 30 years since I've come out. I'm also on medication for depression, PTSD. I get counselling every month. I'm on anxiety tablets. I work with what I have got, and the only thing I have got is fighting for miscarriages of justices. I write books. I won 4 awards for my first 2 books, which I'm very proud of. And I've never won anything in my life, so I was quite taken back by that. So there is a lot of positives I can take out of my life. I studied as well. I studied law. I got my A-levels in law. I went to university when I come out. I've done some really, really positive things. And although my life isn't brilliant, in the sense my health isn't great, I still soldier on and do what I can. I managed to get myself back on track, managed to get myself a flat and a car, and I'm doing okay. I got the most precious thing to me, which money could never buy, is my 12-year-old son, Dainton. He's my world. He's my world. And so as well as I do my work and whatever, I've got the best of both worlds, because I got my son. That's what it's about. It's about being a survivor now and not being a victim. I don't want to be a victim of a miscarriage of justice, because then you're stuck in a rut, and then everybody feels sorry for you, and people come up to you, oh, poor you. I really don't do the poor me syndrome, because that's not me. What I'd like somebody to say to me is like, Mike, you've done okay. You've done well. Do you know what I mean? You've come through it. And people won't judge me too harshly on, my early life. And obviously, I want to see justice for the victim's family. I think that's very important to me and to the victim's family now I've met them. And I feel for them.